But I want to welcome everybody to this event. You know, this is the first in what promises to be a series of Nob Hill Gazette virtual events. My name is Frank Holland. I'm the Executive Vice President of Clint Riley Landmark Properties and the Executive Editor of the Nob Hill Gazette. I'll be moderating today's discussion. You know, we, as you can all see, have a truly star-studded panel of Bay Area real estate legends with us here today. And typically we'd be holding this kind of gathering at the home of our owners, Janet and Clint Riley in Seacliff. We've done those types of events before. Or in our flagship event space, the Julia Morgan Ballroom. And someday we're gonna get back to that reality. And when we do, we'll be very excited to see you all in person. But in the meantime, here we are. So we're gonna have a good time today. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I wanna get into it by introducing our panelists. First up, we have Joel Goodrich of Coldwell Banker Global Luxury, one of the San Francisco Bay Area's most prominent luxury real estate agents for nearly 3 decades. Joel has sold some of the Bay Area's most iconic properties, including the historic 35,000 square foot Owen Clark estate in Hillsborough. Joel's properties have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, CNBC, and Bravo TV, so you've probably seen him. Rachel Swann, now of Compass. Congratulations, Rachel. A top 1% producing agent, Rachel brings more than a decade of real estate experience to her new role. The former managing partner of the agency's first San Francisco office. Before that, Rachel founded the Swann Group, a partner group of agents at Vanguard Properties in 2013. We're also excited to have with us DJ Grubb of the Grubb Company, representing the East Bay. DJ is a Bay Area native and president of the Grubb Company, which was founded in 1967 by his uncle John M. Grubb and his father Donald J. Grubb. During his 22 years of real estate sales and management, he's developed a keen appreciation for his clientele and an intimate relationship with the high-end East Bay residential marketplace. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you.
We're also excited to have Helena Zaludova from Compass. In 2019 alone, Helena closed over 100 million in sales and became one of the highest ranking San Francisco realtors. Most of the properties she listed sold for over asking, and 71% of her buyers' offers were accepted the first time her team made a bid on their behalf. We're also very fortunate to have with us Gregg Lynn of Sotheby's International Realty. Ranked in 2019 as one of the top 2 agents in the city by the San Francisco Association of Realtors, Gregg has represented clients in transactions totaling more than 1.5 billion with a B. Partnering with the creative teams responsible for marketing the world's most prized artworks at Sotheby's Auction House, Gregg works with his clients to curate their home, presenting it to the global market and enabling it to sell at the highest possible price. We're also excited to have Michael Dreyfus representing the Peninsula of Golden Gate Sotheby's. Michael has more than 25 years of success in residential real estate. He's one of the leading sales agents in the Silicon Valley Peninsula area and has regular appearances on the Wall Street Journal Real Trends list of America's top 250 agents. His recent sales have included some of the highest sales recorded in Palo Alto, Woodside, and Atherton. And finally, last but not least, Tracy McLaughlin from the agency in Marin. Tracy has a remarkable real estate success story. In 2019, after nearly 15 years of standing out as the #1 producer in residential sales in Marin County, she was recruited by Mauricio Mansky, award-winning entrepreneur and a real estate trailblazer, to lead the Marin County offices for his state-of-the-art luxury real estate brokerage, the agency. So with introductions out of the way, let's get right into it. We've got about 40 minutes here, a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to ask our panelists to try and keep their answers right around 1 minute each, so we'll have time to get to about 15 minutes at the end of audience questions. At any point during the proceeding, feel free to submit those in your Q&A window. That's not the chat window, it's the Q&A window down at the bottom, and we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we can. So I'd like to start off with a question for Joel, Helena, and Gregg. I think a lot of people anticipated a market collapse, some kind of apocalypse or something back at the end of March, but so far that doesn't seem to be coming to pass. So without getting into the particulars about how the contours of the market are shifting, which we will get into in a moment, what can you tell us about the strength of the market itself? Just kind of give us a snapshot. Joel, let's start with you.
Well, thanks, Frank. Indeed, the market is doing very well. San Francisco, particularly some of the areas such as Pacific Heights and Russian Hills, are some of the world's core luxury markets, like Hong Kong's Victoria Peak, Beverly Hills, Upper East Side of Manhattan. So we're more immune to downturns. So we're seeing quite a bit of activity. Our team in just the last couple of days have written offers on behalf of buyers for 11.5 and 7 million. So we're very active. We also did a statistical study comparing this to the last couple of downturns and how our market relates to that. So we could get to that in the next question. I know you want to limit it to 1 minute, which is hard for us real estate agents. We talk a lot.
That's okay. Helena.
I will second Joel's opinion that the market has some strength in it. I wouldn't say it's in all parts of San Francisco. Definitely on the north end in Pacific Heights, we have seen some incredibly strong sale in the $10 to $25 million range from between March and now. I think the absorption rate is surprisingly good. I think the prime properties in prime locations are holding their value quite well.
Excellent.
Agreed. And I'll add to those notes by saying, 2019 ended very strongly for San Francisco and all neighborhoods, most neighborhoods. The first quarter, even the 10 weeks of it before we went into shelter throughout the city were going to be our best quarter in history for the city. So it was, quite scary for all of us when we shut down everything, in our economy. And then thank you, California Association of Realtors, for putting clear cooperation on us at the same exact time, and our ability not to market our listings, privately like we had been. So we have been through a convulsive period, 4 to 5 weeks of absolutely no activity, but then we rebounded on about May 15th, and it's been a rocket ship ever since. That's what I'll share for now.
Wow. So obviously the primary question on everyone's mind right now is the COVID-19 crisis and how that specifically is driving this market. I'd like to turn our attention to our panelists focused on the premium market adjacent to San Francisco. So Tracy, DJ, and Michael, can you speak to the kind of buyers you're seeing entering your markets right now, and whether you've been able to identify a change in profile or volume or anything else? Tracy?
Yes, absolutely. I can see a very dramatic shift that happened almost overnight. And the profile of the buyer is almost, it's the same person over and over. 2 to 3 children, had briefly thought about leaving San Francisco, maybe 3, 4, 5 years out on the horizon, and made that decision almost immediately and without any preparation, came over here, and they're buying up the inventory that is indoor, outdoor living, pools, resort-like, and almost in like a panic way. It's been very interesting to watch. I had a house last week off market, open Kent Woodlands, that would set a record by $500 a square foot over anything in the history of selling in the hills of the Woodlands, and 2 families from San Francisco, same profile of one another, wanting to buy it. So we have definitely seen a huge surge in high-end luxury buyers wanting a done product, even if it's up in the hills, which usually doesn't trade in as strong a way as the flats does. But very much a surge in that, and very little inventory to sell them. So it's a tight market, and it's very competitive right now.
Interesting. What about you, DJ, in the East Bay?
What's interesting, I've been coaching a lot of San Francisco brokers who are now jumping the bridge because they're finding that their consumer wants to come over to the Oakland, Piedmont, Berkeley communities. We are selling luxury real estate over here for under $1,000 a foot. So my real estate is not expensive compared to other luxury markets in the Bay Area, especially like in Piedmont in the high end. And it goes back to what Tracy was saying. It's the family formation. I think they've been pent up in their, whether it be in the marina or in wherever in San Francisco, in their condominium and or flat, and they're saying, let's get out. And the decision making is very, very precise. And that's kind of the fun part of this whole process, because the real estate agent is more and more in the middle of the transaction than we've ever been. And the process is very, very efficient. Our close of escrows are between 7 and 10 days right now.
Michael?
Yeah, we've seen a kind of, first of all, some things got stood on their head right away. So our traditional walking markets like Palo Alto and Atherton, the close-in markets, have always been our stronger markets as opposed to the west side of 280 and Portola Valley and Woodside. That just got completely reversed. And we saw people coming looking for acreage like I've never seen before. Woodside got wiped out. I mean, there were homes that have been sitting on the market for 2 years, over $10 million, and it literally sold out. It was an incredible thing to watch. And now it's kind of evening up a little bit again, and we're feeling a lot of desire for schools. We're a little broader base than just San Francisco. We're seeing people from Chicago, New York, from all over the place that have ties to the Valley through business somehow, and are making a decision to come and move full time, at least for now. And there's a lot of talk about schools, and they're thinking about schools that can handle social distancing, and maybe in their minds, the suburban schools give a better opportunity for that. So we're kind of swinging back to a more even market from the really land rush that we had early on.
Oh, fascinating. Rachel, I want to turn to you. In your prior role, and certainly now, you've obviously been very focused on big picture issues within the industries. Mm-hmm. Beyond virtual showings, what can you tell us about the ways agents have had to change and adapt to this new environment? You know, the second part of that is, how are buyers and sellers alike responding, and which of these trends do you think are going to continue as the situation begins to normalize?
Yeah, I think there's a big change for agents, right? We're so used to being out and about and, you know, going to lunch and meeting our friends and talking about our listings. And now you don't get to do that as much anymore. I almost, you know, see some of the agents, and it seemed like that shift was really heavy for them. And I think, you know, after they kind of came to grips with reality of where we are, it was, how do I adapt and how do I thrive, right? So Zoom, right? I mean, we're all on Zoom today. It's really changed kind of how we do things. I think, you know, clients went through that same phase of what's happening. Should we pull back? What do we do? And I think, honestly, a lot of the announcements about being able to work from anywhere have really been a big push for most of the clients I work with. A lot of my portfolio is tech folks, and they're like, if we can work anywhere, we're ready to just get out of here and try somewhere different for a while, and we can always come back, you know, to San Francisco. I think for agents, it's just trying to remain positive, finding ways to adapt and thrive and change. But I also am loving that we're really seeing, you know, instead of 100 buyers where maybe 20 of them are serious, we're seeing people that are a lot more serious these days with proof of funds, pre-approval. You know, if you're not a serious buyer, you're not out there as what I would call the quote unquote looky-loo. So I love that aspect of it. And it's also, I think, given all of us a little bit of time to talk to each other more, take care of ourselves a little bit more, and focus on what's really important in our lives.
Yeah, let's turn back to some particulars. And this is a question for the entire group, because I'd like to tease out as much perspective as we can. The COVID crisis has really upended life as we know it. And like you just said, Rachel, it's you know, fundamentally altered people's feelings about what's important. So I'm curious how that's translating to home buying. What are the new dynamics of desirability for properties? Maybe we go back and start with you, Joel.
Well, Frank, what we're finding is that at this point, single family homes are much more in demand than the high-rise condominiums and co-ops. We have some great buildings in San Francisco, both on the north side of town on Russian Hill, Nob Hill, Pacific Heights, and the A-plus buildings south of Market, such as the Four Seasons, St. Regis, 181 Fremont. And they've always been in huge demand, because who doesn't want to be in a building with great services, great amenities, great views? But right now, people are wanting their own space. In fact, some of the buildings you can't even get into for showings. One of the buildings, an A-plus building on Russian Hill, is just finally starting to allow showings. And so it's been very interesting to see the shift, as Tracy was talking about. And Michael, what we had seen in the last few years was a trend toward the urbanization of real estate, where people wanted to be close to everything and in high rises. Now we're seeing almost a little bit of a shift out. I don't think it's going to be permanent, but single family homes, as Helena said, we've had some incredible sales in San Francisco. We've had had two very good co-op sales over 2,400 a square foot in A-plus buildings, but not the level of the single family homes right now.
Helena?
I find that the buyers that I'm working with are absolutely reconsidering the urban aspects of where they live. I found a set of buyers who were considering a home on Laguna and Green, and that just felt too urban, and they made a complete shift into District 4, which is Forest Hill, St. Francis Wood. I think this is almost a seismic shift in perception of how people want to live within the city. So in addition to, looking in Marin and in other markets for just a little bit more space, it's also this, natural craving for just more peace around you. So these neighborhoods that have been a little bit quieter and a little bit away from the hustle and bustle right now are seeing the highest level of activity. And that is by the ocean, Sunset and Parkside, all the way to District 4, as I mentioned, areas that are normally not considered walkable. And I think Michael also touched on that. So that's one area. And within the home, luxury buyers are now looking to solve for everything, working, a room to work from home, a gym, area to work out. I think these homes are becoming so much more important than they solve for so much more than they had to before on a permanent basis.
Greg?
Yeah, Frank, I just wanted to add to what Helena was saying. We were on an important showing yesterday with an important client, and one of the kids says, "Daddy, where will I do my Zoomed call?" Like, understanding the need for light in Zoom calls that a kid would understand. This is something that I could not have fathomed just 90 days ago. So the requirements are changing, and echoing what Joel said about the high-rise condominiums, not in as much demand as they were, just 4 or 5 months ago, but that will swing back, over time. But we're seeing a surge right now in families that are not ready for single family homes, and they're looking at low rise condominium buildings in blue chip neighborhoods. So for example, we, just days on the market, a 2-unit condominium, building in Pacific Heights that has ample outdoor space is very high in demand right now. And we just put into contract in the minutes before getting on the phone. So those are going to be our new marketing thinking about how can we convince sellers who are on the fence that live in low density condominiums. This might be their time to move, because certainly there's a big demand for that product right now in San Francisco.
Right. Tracy, what are you seeing in Marin?
In terms of?
Just in terms of the dynamics of desirability, whether that's at the granular level, what people are looking for in a specific property, or a more, kind of broader perspective.
So that's a great question. What I'm finding is that people want to unpack their suitcases, put their clothes away, and go right back on their devices. We are living in an era right now of very little tolerance for fixers. It doesn't matter if it's an A1 location. I always tell people 20 years ago, sort of during the internet boom, people drove around places like Ross and Belvedere and said, what do I have to pay you to get out of this location so I can build a monument to myself? Today, it's almost the opposite. I see people paying high prices in B or even C grade locations to move in and feel good right away. And that's the contemporary transitional modern farmhouse, anything with indoor outdoor living, a pool, and finishes that feel and look really chic to people. That is what they're paying up for right now. That is what they want. And it's really hard to trade out, even in Ross, in the flats, a great, a fixer. Nobody wants to spend 2.5 or 3 years of their lives going through approvals, unpredictable construction costs, delays, neighbor objections. It's just people don't have the tolerance for that right now.
DJ, are you seeing similar things in the East Bay?
Well, what we're focusing on right now is the definition of luxury and how we speak of luxury. So it's almost our vocabulary has changed. We're incorporating, well, let's give you an example. So like we're speaking of home cooking, family pet friendly, reconnect, celebrate, walk. The compound is very important. Experience the garden, fresh air, comfort, safety, peaceful. So we're more speaking about the experience in luxury in a different context of living in the home. And that graduates to, it goes back to kind of what Tracy was saying, we used to sell the formal living room and the formal dining room. Those were the most important spaces of the home. I bet today the most important spaces of the home are the home office, the kitchen, and the outdoor living. So we've had a fundamental shift in what the consumer wants because they're going to live in the entire space. It's very, very interesting to observe and to articulate to our public.
Michael, how about you?
Yeah, echoing a lot of the themes, the home as a resort is what we're seeing. I've never had so many requests for pools in my life. I'm actually getting bids to put in pools before we put the house on the market because I know it's coming. And that's something people want. A lot of like movie theaters were almost dead in our big, huge homes because the TV screens are so good that it kind of seems silly to have this whole room devoted to a theater and no one was using them. They're way back now. All of a sudden, everybody wants one. Bigger gyms are a big deal. You know, the gyms are too small. I need a bigger gym. I can't go to my gym anymore. We're just seeing the self-contained, I want my home as a resort where I can gather my family is also important. The compounding is a big deal. And of course, the home office thing, and to Gregg's point, and everybody's point, you got not only is a husband and wife possibly on Zoom calls, the kids are on Zoom calls, everybody's working in this environment. So we're really seeing a new, you know, and then again, we almost buried the McMansion and now it's back. You know, everybody was going to the tiny home and now it's just gone right back the other way. Give me space, give me a place I can have my friends over and we can be outside. That's what we're seeing.
Rachel, you want to put the exclamation point on this question?
You know, I was telling an agent about a new house I have coming up in Miraloma Park the other day, and she said, does it have a pool? And I was kind of blown back a little bit. Yeah, I was talking to Monica Pauly this morning, and she had a place, she had posted and it had a pool, and she said, I'm going to sell this place today. And of course she did, because, you know, you really don't see pools in San Francisco. But I think if somebody wants to be in the city, it's, you know, certainly a possibility. I've thought about it in my own backyard, but you know, living with my wife the last 3 months, I've never loved having a 3-story home so much in my life, and I'm sure she feels exactly the same. So I can definitely understand, you know, we don't know what's going to happen, right? There could be a resurgence this fall. You know, some people think we're in a V recovery, you know, potentially a W recovery. If we have to, you know, go back to more stringent rules, I think people are racing now and taking advantage of, you know, historic low rates. And I think they're trying to get somewhere comfortable because, you know, I think there's still just a lot of uncertainty until we have a vaccine. You're going to remain, people are going to remain in that kind of zone. A lot of my clients are hopefully optimistic, but also are trying to move quickly.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears for just a second. And while we've been dealing with this pandemic crisis, another has continued unabated, particularly in San Francisco, and that's the homelessness crisis. So this question goes to Helena and Joel. What can you tell us about the issue as it impacts both your San Francisco sellers and your buyers? Helena?
You know, I have the good fortune of representing properties across the entire city, hence the brand 7x7. And so, you know, there are certain areas that are certainly suffering from the perception of not being a little bit too urban and not feeling as safe. And that would be the Mission in particular, I think certain parts of Potrero Hills. And I can track this by the listings that I've had. The activity on the listings in areas that are more residential and less walkable have performed incredibly well. And the listings that I've had in a Mission, the number of showing has just greatly decreased, even though the marketing push is the same. I mean, it's so I feel that, you know, I don't know if I can chalk it up strictly to homelessness, but it's just the urban feel that you know, the closeness to other people and the being away from not having enough greenery that affecting how people feel about the neighborhood. The other thing I'll mention is that, you know, you live in these urban areas to experience culture and restaurants and shopping, and all of that is gone now. So right. You now, you know, these places just don't feel that great, and it's I think it's definitely affecting those specific areas in terms of number of buyers, and then of course price.
Would you agree with that, Joel?
I have I agree with that. I have a different perspective because of my business. First of all, you know, the homeless has been a very sad situation for a fairly long time. I hope this crisis will help provide a solution. And what we find is for the national and international markets, San Francisco is a huge business destination. In the past, we saw a lot more leisure buyers, the home collectors from around the world who have 10 or plus more homes around the world buying in San Francisco. But we're a huge business destination, and the homeless situation does not change that per se. So we are the tech capital of the world. In spite of everything, I believe we will continue to be. I was fortunate to be on a call with Steven Schwartzman, the founder of BlackRock, I think Friday. And he was saying, no, this is not the end of the office. I agree with that. I believe that we will have a short-term effect, but we'll continue to be a very strong business destination for the national and international buyers. Now, it has affected our leisure buyers, but that's kind of been more than made up in demand by the business and relocation buyers. Also, we're a huge educational destination. Asian and European and Latin American families may have children going to one of our great universities, and they buy here. Years ago, I remember one of my first big sales was a Pacific Heights mansion to I think it was the Minister of Labor for Indonesia at the time, buying it for his two sons who were going to college here. Kind of a nice college pad, a Pacific Heights mansion. So yes, so the homeless situation does deter some of our leisure clients, and when they see what's on the streets, they may decide not to buy. But our business demand and our local demand, we have a very strong business, philanthropic, social community in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and that is not changing. We're still one of the best places to live in the world. Physically, we're one of the most beautiful areas. The incredible diversity in our architecture. The other day, I was going through our various broker tours. Well, I'll show you the other month before the shutdown. We're starting off on Nob Hill, which is our version of Paris, Pacific Heights, and the Legion of Honor, the Palace of Fine Arts. So many incredible, iconic, world-famous landmarks. People still want to be here. And so the homeless is a negative effect, but we have a lot of very positive effects from the various national and international markets.
I'll add one more thing on this. You know, prior to having to stay in San Francisco for months on end, I did a fair amount of travel and business in other parts of the country, especially in the South. And I've noticed that that San Francisco does have a bad rap as over homelessness. This is not something to ignore. This is not something to you know, think that this is not affecting our business travel. I mean, our conferences were canceled. You know, Oracle World is gone because downtown and the area was feeling not so great. I think, you know, when you talk to people in other states about San Francisco, it's not the city on the bay anymore. My perception was that it's, wow, you guys have a big homeless problem. So, you know, I haven't had these conversations over the past 3 or 4 months, but that's where the rest of the country was on San Francisco that I experienced back in January. So it's certainly a topic and something that the city will need to deal with if we're going to continue to be a first-class city.
You know, just very briefly as a follow-up to that, to Michael and DJ and Tracy, do you see, is that a driver of behavior at all? People leaving the city to come to your markets? DJ?
No, it's not. Should I speak?
Sure.
No, it's not part of the dialogue whatsoever in my market.
I can tell you it's just the opposite for me. I think the issue of homelessness in San Francisco is raised consistently when I'm traveling, but as much by people looking for homes out here. I've had clients, new buyers from the Pacific Presidio Heights area saying, I can't believe that the homeless are now in my neighborhood. I'm concerned when I walk outside my house. They never used to be here, you know, not in a derogatory way, but it's just that those neighborhoods, I believe, and I don't work regularly in San Francisco, but I personally believe that the homeless issue in San Francisco is as much a blight on what is going on right now as COVID-19 was. Like, people weren't coming out here just saying, COVID-19, I'm escaping for more space. They were coming out here saying, I've been pushed this far by homelessness for years in what seems like almost an unsolvable problem in San Francisco. And this tipped me right over to finally making a decision to leave a place I never thought that I would leave. And I've heard that from many buyers over here.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's a driver for us. Like people are leaving the city to come to us. I can tell you anecdotally, it's affecting clients that I send to Gregg. Sometimes in their decision to buy there or not. I went to law school at Hastings in the Tenderloin back in the day, and so I've had a lot of experience with what it was then, and it was very different from what it is now. And it's not numbers. It's the the drug problems and the intensity of those drugs. And so it's very different. And I think it is affecting what people's decisions are in terms of their pied-à-terres and their second homes. And we have a lot of those people who have a strong love for the city. I'm one of them. So it's definitely on people's minds.
Thank you. Michael, Frank, can I just add my comment about this? I want to echo on what Michael has said is, we focus in on the second home market, south of Market, and, Russian Hill, Pacific Heights condominium and co-op. Between 2018 and 2019, about a 12-month period, that's when the media noticed the homelessness issue in San Francisco. And that's when the big stories came out of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And that's when there was a big acknowledgement that, hey, there's a big problem here. We lost about 80% of our buyers from the Peninsula, from Marin, from the East Bay that were looking for second homes here, and they haven't come back yet. And so, yes, COVID has been a horrible situation to deal with, but a lot of our second home buyers, which are the strength of our apartment, condo, and condominium market, disappeared a long time ago.
I'd like to kind of turn attention to something that's a little more fun, just kind of a rapid fire thing. I want to ask each of you for a brief answer to a two-part question. Number one, what's the hottest neighborhood in your market right now, a single neighborhood? And number two, what's the number one feature that buyers are looking for in that neighborhood? Gregg, let's go back to you.
Sure, Pacific Heights outdoor space.
Okay. Tracy?
Flats of Ross pool.
Helena?
Coal Valley outdoor space.
Rachel? Oh, you're on mute.
Noe Valley outdoor space.
Joel?
Pacific Heights, excuse me, quality of life.
Michael?
Woodside and acreage, as much as you can get.
Wow. And DJ?
Rockridge, College Avenue in Oakland, walking to coffee.
Wow. All right. All right. A lot of commonality in those answers. We've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we could dive in slightly more depth. The way we work has always somewhat shaped the way we live, but it used to be centered on the commute. Now many experts are saying that the traditional office space 9 to 5 is going to be a thing of the past, particularly for a lot of knowledge workers who really do account for a disproportionate share of Bay Area home buyers. So I'm wondering, how does this new work from home imperative change things? Maybe Rachel, Joel, do you want to jump in on that? Rachel?
Sure. I mean, I think that, people are still acclimating to that. I, have a lot of clients who, I have some clients who were in Minneapolis with a surrogate having a baby. Both of them are in tech. And they said, you know what, we'll stay here for a year. We'll sell. Maybe we'll come back to San Francisco. Maybe we'll decide working from home isn't what we love. And maybe we'll miss San Francisco, but we have an opportunity to work from home anywhere. They can go to Palm Springs for 6 months. They can go, wherever they like. I think, you're not going to see as much international travel, of course, but you're going to see a lot of people traveling throughout the United States. I think it's a little bit different for buyers than agents. I have agents who are gunning to get back into the office to feel some sense of normal, whatever that means these days. But I think you're going to see, I'm seeing everybody go to Marin, so good for Tracy. But I can definitely understand why people want more space, outdoor space, somewhere where they can work from home with a view. They can, take a break from meetings and hop into the pool. People have the ability to make their office environment anything they want right now by just choosing a home. And I think that's pretty powerful, because in the past I felt like nobody in San Francisco worked on Fridays because the cafes were all full, and people, places like Google, they had all the amenities, right? They wanted people to stay there forever. So I guess we'll see what the results are of productivity at home with some of the workers. But I think people are just really loving the freedom to choose to work wherever they would like to be.
Joel?
I'm a huge believer in the office. If I'm not showing property, I'm in the office. I kind of agree with Marissa Meyer said when she was CEO of Yahoo, come into the office. If you look at every great tech company, whether it was Hewlett Packard 80 years ago, Google 20 years ago, Facebook 15 years ago, it's 3 people together 24/7. And Steven Schwartzman, CEO of BlackRock, had an interesting comment on the call I was in on Friday. Without people being in the office, you can't build a culture. And a lot of companies are built on culture. And then one kind of final thing, and then Mark Zuckerberg interviewed in the Wall Street Journal when the pandemic first started, saying it's kind of tough on Facebook because they were having employees fly in from other offices for face-to-face meetings. So about a week into the pandemic, I'm on a Zoom call with 16 of my relatives. My 4 aunts and uncles are all college professors, kind of genius IQ, math, physics, French literature. My cousin, who's in Austin, had actually founded one of the earliest video teleconferencing companies. And so the son of one of my other cousins, who's also in tech in Austin, said, oh, you know, this is going to be the end of the office. So my cousin, who founded the video teleconferencing company, said, well, I require all of my employees to come into the office every day. And the interesting thing about that whole conversation, it happened on an afternoon where my senior marketing associate and myself happened to be in the office because we needed to get something done here. And he was kind of listening to this call. So at the end of the day, we looked at each other and said, wow, spending 4 hours together, we got so much done that would have taken us 2 days if we were remote. So bottom line, I'm a huge believer in the office.
Coming back.
I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. Completely different experience from my clients and for also just from my team. We have moved into Zoom on day one. All of us have set up home offices. I've always had one, and my clients are 80% of my clients don't plan to work from the office. In fact, the productivity level has gone up because you've cut out all the commute, all the interruptions, and you have accountability tools that keep you engaged for longer amounts of time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, but I was just reading in the Wall Street Journal, a lot of VCs are reluctant to invest in startups where most of the workforce is working remotely. But I agree, there's going to be a lot more online, such as we're doing today. So it'll be a mix, but the office will not go away. And I think the attitude of the VCs kind of reinforces how they believe in the office.
You know, one piece of coronavirus guidance that's really crystallizing for, all of us is the safety of outdoor interactions versus indoor interactions. And obviously in your answers about the most desirable quality of properties right now being outdoor spaces, I wanted to direct a quick question to Michael and DJ. Tracy, you've weighed in on this, and I thought that answer was fantastic about, these big park-like outdoor spaces for entertaining, allowing kids to run around and go crazy. How is that, do you see that really driving value in a substantial way versus, kind of the typical, elements that you would look at in selling a high-end property? DJ?
Well, I think if you go back 30 years, we used to have the visual garden, right? We no longer have the visual garden. We have the garden experience to the degree where we're building outdoor rooms in the garden space. So if you look at the format of what are the public rooms in the home, well, there's the living room, dining room, and it may just now be the outdoor room as a public space for the property. So yes, definite trend, definitely important.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot a bit lately about our weather, funny enough. And I'm watching these people come from Chicago, New York, where it gets very hot in the summer, Houston, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, we got some nice weather here. And you can be outside a lot, and you can eat outside at a restaurant, and you can do all these things. And I think that is a big driver that's going to start to come. I feel so conflicted about what's going on in our area because, back to the point that you were just talking about, I had a lot of people buy in Palo Alto. They would be sitting there in 1,800 square foot house that's $4 million, and they'd be shaking. They go, you know what? I just don't want to drive over that bridge anymore. I'll take it. I think that's changed. I think we got a lot of people coming DJ's way. I have millennial kids, 28-year-old, 25-year-old. My 28-year-old works for, a big tech company. She's a software engineer, and she's not going back in the office much. I can tell you that's happening. And now it's dictating where she's going to live. She moved from San Francisco to the East Bay. So there's so many things swirling around that are positive and negative, and it's kind of hard to figure out where this balance is going to come in. But I think that one thing about just thinking about weather and the fact that you can sit outside in California, especially where I am, and especially where DJ is, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And Frank, if I could add something.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Just on a more urban level as well. I mean, what we're seeing in Noe Valley is the city doing slow streets where they're blocking through traffic on certain streets. So on Sanchez between 23rd and 30th, there's no through traffic. You're seeing people who are biking, walking, up and down the street, playing ball. We're seeing a little bit of a change there. And, from the commercial corridors, and I know this is already happening in the East Bay, but we're seeing where the city is allowing people to take out parking spots and do more parklet and kind of shutting down certain parts of the streets over the weekends with almost like a European feel, which I think is awesome that we're able to utilize that space more often. And I think with people driving less, parking is less important on those corridors as well.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is I was interviewing my daughter, who is an event planner at the high end in San Francisco, and I was trying to find some perspective. And the big reveal is as we go forward, we've also gone back. In other words, I asked my daughter, this was kind of out there a little bit. I said, tell me about what's popular in the food industry today. And she said, pickling, baking, soup. Okay. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm with my grandmother, right? And so this dialogue is also going back 30 years to how our grandparents and our parents lived in their homes. This isn't new. It's just that we trended out of the house into the restaurant. We're now trending back into the home. Yeah. So it was a very interesting reveal for me.
Yeah. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We're coming up on almost the 10-minute mark, and we have a number of questions from the audience. So I want to start throwing these out, and maybe I'll just kind of throw them out at random. And if you want to jump on after whoever fields the initial question, please feel free to do so. We've had a couple people ask if the trend toward employees working from home, particularly in tech, is driving an exodus from the city to the suburbs. And I think we've answered that. We've had some good commentary on that. But the flip side to that is, do you see them leaving the Bay Area altogether? Do you have a lot of clients that are completely getting out of Dodge? Greg?
I do, and we have for some time. So there's been no secret that it's expensive to live in California. And once you have your liquidity event and you're growing your family, you start to make decisions about where you want to spend the next 5 to 10 years. So we've had an exodus for some time. The coronavirus has sped up decisions that may have been 3 to 4 years away are happening now. So absolutely, we are.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a combination. I mean, there's different people that do different things. If you're a hedge fund guy and you have a staff of 4 people, you're going to Hawaii and you're working from there. But Joel's right. Culture is a big deal. And even with my daughter, I think she's going to move farther away, but I don't think she's going away, because I think she's going to come into the office once a week. She's still going to touch that place, but she's not going to do it as often, and it's going to give her the ability to move farther. And not driving across a bridge one day a week is a lot different than 5. And so I think that's going to be what we're going to see.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Michael. In the last 3 months, we've worked with clients from New York, Los Angeles, and Shanghai, looking and buying here. So we still have an influx. My clients who are leaving tend to be going to Marin, wine country, sometimes the Peninsula. So we remain the best place in the world to live, bottom line.
Absolutely. And can I respond, Frank, to something that Helena said a couple of questions ago? Indeed, our city is stricken with blight. And shops are closed and restaurants are closed, and many of the cultural things that we are so famous for are now not available. They're going to come back. They are going to come back. And I lived in New York City during the 80s. And so I remember what a horrible place it was and how strong, decisive leadership turned that city around. San Francisco is waiting for that moment, and families will come back.
Oh, yeah.
So here's an interesting question from Karen Lyle. Karen says, in my private jet charter connections, we've also been seeing a surge in business. I also handle high-end private collections of pianos that I use to partner with real estate agents for staging the houses for sale with a gorgeous $250,000 grand match to the house. Without high-end events in the homes, do you foresee that creating Zoom events with live music and staged lights and cameras to replace the private event that used to be the standard for presenting a luxury house to buyers? Helena?
I can tell you that in rural neighborhoods that are now in stage 3, they are having private events in the home with the proper protocols of COVID. So I don't think there's a big trend here that we're going to lose private events whatsoever. I think we're going to cycle back into it as we phase into these different phases.
Realtors are a resilient bunch.
Very much so.
Yeah, and real estate is I heard somebody in retail say the retail places that are going to survive are the ones that are experiential, you know, that you have to go and you have to touch things. And real estate is all that. And trust me, I have been trying to do virtual everything for the last 3 weeks, and it just doesn't work. Okay, it just does not deliver the experience, which makes the agent more important than ever, because one agent can deliver an experiential experience to 10 clients just verbally, but eventually you got to feel these things and you got to get into them. And I think that's, I kind of decided, like, forget, I'm not even going to try this anymore. I'm just going to push to get my people back in the house.
Yeah.
Just
you know, that's what we got to do.
Just sign your PED forms first, please.
Yes, sir.
When we asked the hot neighborhood question, I believe, Rachel, you said Noe, correct?
Yeah, single families in Noe Valley are doing really well here.
Okay, I'm gonna direct this question from Curtis Larson to you, and I'm gonna couple it with one from George because it's a neighborhood adjacent. Curtis asks, can the panelists comment specifically on the Noe Eureka Valley market's pricing and time on the market trends as a result of the quick adaptation to work from home, especially by tech and biotech, which were previously drawn to the area based on easier peninsula access?
So I think that, you know, you're still seeing some longer days on market, but, you know, I think if things are priced really well, you're seeing multiple offers. I actually have seen a huge rise in also not only Noe Valley and Eureka Valley, but also Miraloma Park, which was absolutely on fire before the shelter in place. But it's interesting having a listing up there. It's the same 10, 20 agents. You know, people are very specifically looking for neighborhoods that they liked before. They're feeling like they're getting what we have called the Corona cut, which might be a little bit of a discount, but I think, you know, well-priced single-family homes, Eureka Valley, Noe Valley, Miraloma, Glen Park, people are looking for something. You know, there's certain people, they don't want to leave the city. They love the city. They've just come here. They've been here a couple of years. They're expanding their family. Even if they do work at a tech space, you know, we think about how much some of the people in the tech world make. You know, they can have a house in wine country. They can have, you know, like Gregg was talking about, a lot of these clients have, you know, multiple houses. I don't think it's going to change single family prices as much. You know, what I was seeing in my business was more of District 8 condos that, you know, if you looked at May sold listings last year, you know, 51 in District, you know, 8 and 13, you know, a 75%, almost 75% reduction. You know, you look in Noe Valley and it's only about a 50% reduction in the general District 5. So I do think that, you know, people like to be close to downtown. I think, you know, Noe Valley really erupted with, you know, tech in Silicon Valley. There's still something to be said of, you know, that one day a week that you go into the office, does it take you 30 minutes longer coming from Pacific Heights. You know, my clients were, you know, to Gregg's point, exodusing to East Bay, South Bay, but it was mostly people with children, and they were looking for, you know, the schools. You know, we've always had an issue with schools, but also a lot of them didn't want to drive across the bridge. And, you know, the couple times I've done that, it was like Michael Douglas falling down moment. So I completely understand how people feel about the drive. But I think, you know, I think things are going to hold strong in District 5. You know, Eureka Valley's always had incredible price points. And, you know, there are certain people with dual income in the Castro that don't want to leave. I've actually seen people coming from Silicon Valley who said, you know what, with low interest rates, we can afford something in the city. And so I'm seeing people come into the city as well. But I think District 5 has, you know, always held their numbers really well. And, you know, go Noe Valley and Eureka Valley.
Yeah, just very quickly, George says, no one mentioned the Castro as a hot neighborhood. Has it lost its popularity?
No,
It's a hot neighborhood.
it's a hot neighborhood.
We'll take that one. A couple more from our guests. Let's see. Let's see. You know, there's one from Aiden Vaziri that I think is a really wonderful one for us to close on before we wrap up, and that's, what is one thing that each of the panelists feels optimistic about? I think that's a good punctuation point here. We'll start with you, Michael.
Oh God, me first. I'd say a return to what really matters. Family, friends, you know, a looking inward after probably a period when we were all looking out.
Got it. Joel?
I'm very optimistic for the second half of this decade. Even before the pandemic happened, I was projecting a huge boom in the 2025 through 2030. If you look at history, the 1918 through 1920 pandemic, it was handled very differently. They did not shut down, and unfortunately, there were many deaths. They had a mild recession. The stock market dipped a bit. First 2 years of the 1920s had some economic activity, but by 1923 was the beginning of the biggest economic boom in world history. The latter part of the 1920s were the most over-the-top social decade ever. So I have a feeling that after a few years, people are going to want to live again. This has been a very, very difficult, sad, in many ways tragic year. But a few years from now, people will think, okay, we made it through and we're just gonna want to live again. And we remain the tech capital of the world. I am a big believer in a big boom in the last part of this decade.
Rachel?
You know, innovation and human connection, right? You know, I think, you know, connection is one of the 5 like human necessities. And I think people have really learned how to connect again in a world that had become so disconnected by devices, and you know how much they missed that. I can't tell you how many people said, I can't wait to see my friends again. I can't wait to hug somebody again. I can't wait to shake hands with somebody again. So I think it's made us realize how important that is. And I think, you know, some of the innovation that you're going to see in real estate and other businesses, I think is going to help make things easier for people in real estate so they can experience more of that connection. I think the world as a whole, I think it's taught us a lot of lessons over, you know, this sip time. Lots of sipping and lots of sipping.
Tracy, what makes you optimistic today?
I'm optimistic about the heightened need, if now more than ever, for really quality real estate agents. I think that there's always been this prognostication that we are going to be unnecessary, especially with automation and all this stuff. And if anything, I think the complexity of the world that we're living in, the constant shifting, and the need for true intelligence in transactions is really still very much needed, maybe now more than ever. I feel very optimistic about that.
Helena?
I feel optimistic about San Francisco and the Bay Area remaining the center of innovation and sort of becoming and remaining a leader in this revolution in technology. I feel like we are the strongest concentration of smart people anywhere in the world still. And that makes me very optimistic about the future here.
DJ?
I think I'm optimistic about the fact that technology will not replace the real estate agent. And I think that has been proven through this COVID process, that we are in the center of the transaction, and our emotional intelligence is very, very important in today's modern world, right? That's what I believe.
All right. And Gregg, you're going to get the last word on this question.
This isn't easy because the set was from Joel and Helena. I'm all about San Francisco and its future. I'm so optimistic that we are indeed the center of the creative and technology and now financial universes. And there's just no turning back from San Francisco. We are a city that has its challenges, and the coronavirus has exacerbated them. But I'm confident that moving forward, everybody is going to realize that the Bay Area is the greatest place on earth to live. We're going to have an increased importance on each other, our health, our interdependency, and our wellness. And those are welcome. And I'm optimistic about all of that.
That's fantastic. That's a great place to leave it. You know, there are a handful of other really great questions that, you know, I'd like to be able to answer those. And what we're going to do is I'll actually take those down and get those out to our panelists. For those of you who are watching who ask questions, look for an email getting those answers that you'd asked for. But, you know, I want to be respectful of everyone's time today, so we're going to call it a wrap right here. I want to thank all of our incredible panelists for sharing your time and insight with us. And I'd like to thank all of our guests for tuning in today and for these fantastic questions. Just so you all know, you'll be able to view the recorded video of the event both on our YouTube channel and on our website at nobhillgazette.com in the coming days. And we'll be featuring this discussion in print in our July issue of the Gazette, which is going to drop on July 11th. So look out for that. I would get in trouble from the rest of the team if I didn't mention that you can still advertise in that issue. So contact sales at nobhillgazette.com to inquire. And just in closing, I'd like to thank our associate publisher, Jill Petroviak, our sales director, Karen Frazier, contributing editor, Jennifer Blott, and our art director, Matt Petty, for all their hard work in helping pull this together. Thank you once again to all of our panelists. And it was a wonderful discussion. I really appreciated it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Frank.
Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care.